So running is so gravity does really weird things to a body when it's hitting the concrete, right? So I learned a lot. I learned when it was time to go, and I learned that your instincts, when they tell you it's time to go.
How did you know? What were your instincts?
Okay, number one, if you show up to a march and the police were in what they call hats and bats,
yeah.
They were already dressed and they had the zip tie things.
Yeah.
That's a telltale sign that something is going to go down.
Yeah.
That's when you have to kind of really pay attention.
Yeah. So you could feel sort of tension when it would start to build,
yeah,
right?
And
yeah.
all of a sudden when you feel like, okay, the butterfly, something's going on. Okay,
yeah.
Where's the closest subway? And it worked throughout the entire couple years
yeah.
of going out. Just
you learn to trust your gut.
Trust your gut. That's
yeah.
the biggest thing.
You know, it was interesting for me though, because I noticed that you start to understand like some of the leaders, nothing against them, but like some of them were going to draw more attention perhaps, or like we're known for having more contentious, and appropriately so oftentimes, but more contentious kind of marches and rallies, right? And that might attract a certain kind of crowd. And I started to get to a place where I was a little bit hesitant because I started steering towards certain events that I thought were going to be a little bit safer and a little bit less controversial, but then I was really torn about this, to be honest. I'm like, is that a cop-out for me? No pun intended, but like, am I doing the right thing by steering this in that direction? Should I be leaning more into some of the more challenging kind of events? But I think I just got into a place of just saying, you know what, I'm doing what I can do, it's what I'm comfortable doing, and my focus was on producing imagery that I thought was going to be powerful, and maybe it was a little bit different from what other people were doing, who were maybe going for the much more dramatic, full-on, like, classic protest kind of stuff, the confrontations with the police and all of this.
Yeah, and I mean, over time, I stopped going to certain events because I think some of the leaders probably understood that you were also somewhat responsible for some of the people that would come out and march.
Of course, yeah.
So, and if you were the type of leader that would kind of go up and provoke like the police and to cause like people to get arrested, those are the ones that I would kind of avoid because now you're putting my safety in jeopardy.
Right. And at what cost, right? Is it worth it?
I think what happened also, you know, for me, it was more or less the level of maturity of some of these people. You know, that mattered. But I think also there were a lot of people who've never been leaders before, and they were kind of figuring out
how to be a leader in the moment.
How to be a leader,
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then some of them would look at it as a way to bump their social status online and things like that. And but as a, you know, I always considered myself kind of like an outsider looking in. But you pick up on those dynamics. You pick up on who's done this before, who's a natural leader, who's trying to be a leader.
Yeah.
So you started picking up on that. Then you also started seeing other people no longer showing up who used to show up in the beginning. And I remember running into people too, and it was like, people were saying, I never felt safe when I was out there, you know, amongst some of the protesters.
And you don't really know unless you until you get to know people, you don't know what their intentions are. Same thing for us, right? That was part of the reason I think that I was even questioned at the beginning. Like, I literally had people coming up to being like, seriously, like, what are your intentions? Like, I had people, I mean, I don't mean to laugh about it, but because I know myself, and I was like, but I'm here for the right reasons, but I realized, well, they don't know me. Like, why? I get it. Like, I understand them thinking, especially for a photographer, where there's always, not always, but I think for many people who are not familiar with some of our work, right? And they don't know us as human beings. They don't know what we stand for. They don't know our intentions.
Right.
Are you here just to take advantage of this? Are you here to try to make a name for yourself? To your point, like even with some of these leaders, but same thing for photographers. Are you here to just boost your socials?
Right.
You know, because you think it's the cool or the right thing to do to post stuff that's, you know, about Black Lives Matter, right? So I think I think it was good that people were asking those questions because it forced me to ask those questions of myself, quite honestly.
But I think to your point about like the images, I remember one of the images that I took was at Battery Park, and there was a safety training class that the Black trans group they were doing with Mike Matos, and he was doing some safety training down there. And I remember afterwards, at the end, some of the black trans, like Queen Jean, she was speaking, and there were this couple, they were holding hands. And I shot them from the back, holding hands while I think Queen was talking. But, so they asked me about that particular picture, and I said that really what was ironic about this is this peaceful gathering of people learning self-defense, that I said, you may not have known this, but beyond this group, about maybe 20 or 30 feet beyond them, there were about 10 cops standing under a street lamp, just standing there, just waiting. And, but I said, that was kind of the irony of this particular image. People holding hands, standing and talking, but beyond that, in the shadows or under a lamp, but you know, away that the cops were right there.
Yeah,
so
and you can capture that though, right? I think that's also really interesting, right? So I mean, those are the interesting kind of like those juxtapositions, right? And those points of contrast. I think also like it's interesting to just be on that kind of trajectory, right? And to be kind of on that path of exploring what is this journey. What do I want this journey of photography to be for me?
Right.
And so it was like a conscious decision to pivot from, okay, I'm going to take a pretty travel picture or a pretty skyline picture of New York, which is always great.
Yeah.
But like, what's the meaning behind that, right? And so that also like got me into this place of thinking, okay, again, tied to like the bio and like what I wanted myself to end up being. I'm like, I was becoming much more aware of my humanity, and then also becoming much more aware of the power, the potential power of photography and my own work to say something more than just beauty.
What do you think now that like everybody is a quote unquote photographer, or at least everyone has a camera? Do you think it's diluted your work, or has it contributed to photography in general, or?
It's such a good question. I love this question. You know, I'm really mixed on it, to be honest. Like, I mean, my initial reaction, like, and look, I mean, I'm an iPhone, like, I live my life with my iPhone, as someone of us do, right, or a smartphone. And people would ask me, like, you know, as a photographer, you take yourself and your work so seriously. Does it bother you that everybody, to your point, like, has a camera with them all the time? I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that was my initial reaction. Like, yeah, it bothers me because everyone thinks they're a damn photographer. Not everyone's a photographer just because you can, you know, you have like the gear. And I used to always use like the examples of, you know, people I know, I have friends who have incredibly expensive gear.
Yeah.
And they do good work, but, you know, I don't think it's necessarily the most powerful work. Then I have friends and colleagues who are iPhone photographers only, and they have unbelievable, powerful, compelling, gorgeous work, right? So I always say it's never just about the gear. So I guess where I'm coming from on this is, in the big picture, I don't think the gear necessarily matters. And in the big picture, it doesn't bother me that photography is top of mind for everybody now, because I think in some ways, this is the optimist in me, I think people do appreciate photography because they're doing it too. However, the flip side is, you know I'm going there. The flip side is, and I say this often, I think people appreciate photography in many ways more than they ever used to. And look, I think you and I both have, I don't know, I want to speak for you. I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram. I think as photographers, we use it to some extent. I think we need it. Like, I always joke, I'm like, I want someone other than my mother and my husband to look at my work. So it's like social media is good for that, you know? I have a broader audience, I suppose, even though it's still relatively boutique, which is okay. But people may appreciate photography, but I don't think people appreciate photographers and like the actual artists behind photography. That's sort of the struggle that I have. And I think that shows itself in so many different ways. And I think you probably, I know that you've seen this as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of times people think of photographers as like paparazzi. And just out there just to get a shot so they can get money or
like transactional, right? It's for a job or whatever.
Right. And I think, and you can see that where, especially when you see a lot of your work out there uncredited.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a lot of my. I used to like reach out to people and say, hey, would you mind like crediting blah blah blah,
Did you stop doing that?
Nowadays, I see them like,
you just give up.
I just get, oh my God, because you'd be doing it all the time. You'd be doing it all the time. So,
so have you just given up on that because it's just too much and it's exhausting and you got to pick your battles?
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
It is exhausting, and I don't have to, because it's also frustrating because you can look at it and say, all my stuff is being stolen left and right. You know what? I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to give up.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I find photography as very therapeutic.
Yeah, same.
I find that it allows me to kind of take myself out of like the everyday like hustle and bustle, and go into a state where you're like just really focusing on the beauty of something that may not in and of itself be a beautiful thing, but you could find the beauty in something.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like you're looking up, it's like, wow, all the time is flown, and then you look at your work and all of a sudden it's like, wow, look what I created. Yeah. I live on both sides of my brain.
Same, yeah.
And I just love that. I love how I can go to work and do technology, IT stuff, and then I can just flip to the creative side and be doing something that's totally just about like light, grays and darks and colors and things like that, and take a moment that could be a protest or it could be just something, a negative event, and find something in there that captures and tells a story that people can look at and say, wow, that is very powerful, what I'm seeing right now. And so you kind of you lose yourself in this other piece of it, but it's all a part of who you are.
I mean, it's funny that you talk about it as therapy. I don't think you and I talked about that before. I describe it exactly the same way to people. They're like, why do you do this? Like, you're so busy. How do you have time? And I would say, well, I don't have kids, so there's that, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's, it's sort of, I guess, my surrogate for that. Like, I need it. I actually need it. I think you're the same. Based on how you just like, I need to almost every day, if not every day, do something related to it, right? Whether I'm out shooting or I'm editing or I'm writing, because I love to write and you do as well, right?
So your writing is impeccable. I mean, I'm reading your captions, I'm like, whoa.
Thank you. I love it almost as much as photography, although if I had to choose, it would always be photography.
Oh yeah, okay.
But it's funny because in the past, I've been told by people who are like, hardcore photographers, like, your work should speak for itself. Yeah. You should never have to write context for your work. And I used to agree with that 100%. Like, and I do still think there's validity to that because I think imagery has to stand on its own. But I also feel like, especially in this day and age, depending upon the kind of work that you're shooting and what you're putting out there, and look, it's Instagram too, right? Like I used to blog and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People like to hear the stories.
Yeah, but
right? I mean, it's the context. I think if people like lean into some of that. They want to know what's behind.
Yeah, but your images stand on their own. Yeah. They already do. So when you add the backstory to it, it's like it makes it like 100% more like intense.
Yeah.
To hear the backstory of
full sensory experience, all of it, right? I think it's immersive, right? It's like immersive storytelling, and I think to your point, like it doesn't have to just be about imagery. I think that in some ways, as much as I have my love-hate with Instagram, it's good that it kind of limits you, right? There's a character limit, and it's like I've actually I will draft things and be like, that's a little too long, and it'll force you to be more succinct and be a little bit more cohesive with your storytelling, which I think is actually, as much as I have that love-hate relationship, it's actually made me more efficient as a writer, and it helps me get to the point, which I think has also been a really interesting skill set development, strangely. Like I didn't expect that.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't even read a lot of captions.
Well, that's true. I do wonder this. Like how many, you read my stuff. I don't know how many people really read it.
I read your stuff because I know that when you write, you say something.
Oh,
but a lot of people will write stuff and I'm like, what? Did ChatGPT write this for them or?
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about that?
I don't know. I can't say right now because I've messed with it a few times.
Yeah.
Maybe no more than 5 times. And I've seen like these videos on like how to use it for doing certain types of things. I've never used it for something of, to enhance something that I've done. So I can't really say. Like the digital age has made things a lot easier for people. Like people would say that, are you a real photographer if you are shooting with a digital, camera versus an analog, it's like the same thing. It's like I'm using this other tool to do something for me. Oh, you're not a writer anymore. This other thing is writing it for you. You know, so I don't know. I'm just at a point right now. I think it's so early.
So it's interesting. So I've had a lot of conversations around this, and I've played around with it as well. So we're, you know, I don't know what it's a subscription or whatever it is. Like we have a monthly thing that we do with ChatGPT, and like there's millions of people on it now, so you can barely get on, but that'll change. So we've experimented a little bit, Mark and I. Same thing for imagery. So like DALL-E, I started playing with that too, and you know, the first time I played with it, my first reaction was, holy shit! Like this is unbelievable what it can do. And my second reaction was, holy shit, have I been training myself as a photographer for 23 years only to now like basically press a button or a few buttons and have technology create perhaps a better image than I could ever generate? Like how do I feel about that, you know? So here's where I take some solace right now, right? Is one, because like we talked about, we do this because we have a genuine love for it, right? I mean, I think for any creative, for any artist, you have to do this because you love it. Like, I need to do this for myself. You're the same way, right? Like I need to write.
The therapy that you need.
Exactly. It's a therapy, right? Like I need the photography. I have to do this for my own sanity, for my own mental health. It just makes me feel better about myself. That will never be taken, like technology or not, that will never be taken away.
Yeah.
What's interesting though, I was reading an article that Aperture actually had put out, I think a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a little bit earlier. And they were talking about how the technology now, at least for now, it struggles with the nuances of humanity, which I think was so interesting because like you and I are focused so much on that now, right? Like focusing on human faces and focusing on elevating communities and that sort of thing. So much of our work is rooted in photographing human beings, right? Whether individuals or or you know the groups and the communities. And I started experimenting with this too, so it's weird. Let's try this at some point, right? With DALL-E, and like put in some prompts. And ask it to like generate people. And it's not that it can't generate faces and it can't generate people, but it does it in a really weird, awkward way. Like the people end up looking bizarre, like super abstract and surreal. So it's one thing if that's like the look you're going for.
Does it just make up the face totally on its own, or do you input anything like?
So it's using. So the input behind all of this basically is right, and this is part of the debate now, right? And a lot of lawsuits that are going on, right? It's just like where it's sourcing all this stuff from. I mean, AI is only as good for now. It's only as good as the inputs, and so the inputs right now, of course, it's kind of everywhere. Obviously, it's everything that's available, you know, publicly. But it's not sophisticated enough yet to interpret or interpolate some of those nuances, like human gesture. Like if you put in a joyous human face, you know, of an adult, for example, next to a child, it can technically execute on that, and you'll get a version of that. But those little tiny things that you and I capture in images, right? Those moments and those expressions, it ends up abstracting it. They actually end up looking like almost disturbing. Like they're weird. Try it at some point. Like it's super it's funny at this point,
but it almost sounds like somebody's going to take that and say, oh, here's my work. I'm going to slap it in like the Guggenheim and call this art.
I mean, and would that be wrong? Would that be wrong? I mean, that's an interesting question,
Art
right?
is subjective, so.
Of course, If technology gets to a point, so I'm saying right now, like I take solace because we're focused on humanity, and right now, like technology is not able to execute, so I feel like our work still has value. So yeah, I had that sort of question of like, will we become obsolete as photographers of humanity at a certain point? Is there still value? Do we bring something that's unique or different? I don't know the answer to that yet, right?
I mean, I don't think you can. I don't think you can replicate like your composition necessarily, or what you're trying to capture, you know, in your image. I mean, that's you. That's your body and your mind saying, this is what I want to capture in this image. But you're doing that piece. Okay, the digital piece is taking the bits, the zeros and the ones, and putting it in, you know, and making a digital image version of it. And then you're taking tools and you're manipulating the image yourself to make it into what you want it to be, but there's a digital component of it. So it's not, the digital piece of it is not doing anything without your input.
Exactly. And so it's interesting, this is a good point, because so I work with a few folks who are experts, if you will, in technology and AI in particular. And I've talked to them about this, you know, and the future of, for example, creative direction or art direction, right? And I think you could extrapolate this to photographers and writers and that sort of thing, is going to become less about what we think about as writing and photographing, and more about the art of prompting, as it was. It's the curation and the articulation of the ask, and how you actually engage with the technology that becomes the art form itself, as opposed to what we think of as the core writing of the track. And it was such a mind-blowing
I see like this whole
perspective for me. I'm like, I never would have thought prompting would become an art form. It's
but
like,
you know
well, that
what?
is the future.
I can see it now. It's like, what do you do? Oh, I'm an AI prompter.
All right, so you're gonna ever do this full time, Gary?
Do this with full time?
Like
No.
quit everything else and just become a photographer?
I've never really considered myself to be a photographer, because I think I've wrestled with, and I've mentioned this before, the various people, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And am I a photographer? When I grabbed my camera the first time and I went out there and started taking pictures, and people, it's a photographer. Oh, you're a photographer. Oh, you're a photographer. I'm like, no, I'm not a photographer. I just have a camera. I take pictures and I try to capture, but I've never really labeled myself as a photographer. Even on my Instagram, I call myself a visual artist.
Yeah.
But I've never.
You're a photographer, by the way. But okay, I understand your point.
I have a press pass now, and that came.
So you're legit.
Yeah, that came about by.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like, all your stuff is getting published in different places, and you're like, whoa, I have enough material to apply for a press pass.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, let me try it. Oh, I got a press pass.
Yeah.
Holy, and I used it for the first time at the Lunar New Year parade.
That's right. I know it was a reminder for me, by the way, that I have completely forgotten to apply for it.
But I'm sure you can get it, with all the stuff that you've done and everything. But and that's kind of like, even the first time I wore it for that parade, I felt like I shouldn't even have it.
Really?
But it was like, because you see all these like, these older photographers wearing their photography vests and all the cameras around them, and you're like the National Geographic photographer looking people, and here you are with a little like prime lens camera walking down the.
You're just more efficient. That just
I'm
means
more efficient. That's what I've learned.
So.
Just minimize the stuff. You know what part I like about photographing runners and like Define? It's when we have these events and some of the runners will bring their parents up to me and introduce, hey, this is Gary.
Best.
Oh, you're the one that did the picture of my daughter or my son. And I'm like, oh yeah. And they're like, oh, that's such a beautiful, oh, Gary. That's like, that.
I mean, you
beats
can't.
every like on Instagram.
Those are those visceral feelings and moments that you can't possibly describe that, right? And that is the ultimate reward.
That is a reward, and it's only for it's just that for that one person or that family and stuff like that, So, but it's very rewarding. That's my reward at the end of the day when someone says, hey, thank you for that. I love that photo that you took of me. And
so how long have you been photographing with them now?
This month, April 10th, would be 2 years.
2 years?
2 years photographing
I didn't realize
Define.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a really important point, I think, too, Ryan, and it's something that I don't think I used to think about very much. Them just knowing Gary's going to be here. Yeah. Gary's photographing me, and like the connection that happens, the trust that they have becomes so embedded, and that shows in the work. It shows in the work, right? I mean, how they engage with you, and I'd love to believe that people can see that. I don't know that everyone can. There are some of those like really fine nuances.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways there's something really beautiful about the fact when you show up every Saturday, you're just part of the community. You're not just a photographer. You are a part of their community. You're part of their family. And I think that significantly informs the work, how it shows up. If you're doing a transactional picture or someone just showed up, like if I just showed up at this community, like maybe I'll get a couple decent pictures out of it, but it's not going to be the same level as what you're able to achieve because they know who you are. You're part of their family. I'm guessing that you probably pick on that as well. Yeah,
they definitely do. And I think as a photographer, especially like so running is so gravity does really weird things to a body when it's hitting the concrete, right?
Oh, yes it does.
So, and I'm very cognizant of that.
Yeah.
So I will not put out an image where you're hitting the concrete very hard, and certain parts of your body are like distorted because for that millisecond, gravity is like doing some weird stuff to you. I won't do that. And if someone's leg is totally warped because of the concrete, I'll just crop it out, but I'm not going to
just super thoughtful. I'm sure they appreciate it.
And I mean, I don't really tell people that, but those are the things I look for those things. Well, let's talk about your dance stuff.
Oh, dance stuff.
Yeah, because you kind of you talked about pivoting, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing like this. You're doing Holly stuff. You're doing dance stuff.
So it's interesting. I mean, So thank you for bringing it up. I mean, it's all part of the evolution, right? Like, I don't consider myself a dance photographer. I mean, there are proper dance photographers out there.
You do a great job. I mean,
thank you. It's a learning curve, but this is part of the beauty of it too, right? Like, I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, but there's still a lot to learn, and that's part of what I love about it is the learning curve, right? Is being able to continue to explore other subject matter. Dance is something I've always appreciated.
Were you ever a dancer?
Yes, but not a real one. So I will say that I took dance classes. I will not call myself ever a dancer.
Did you dance with a group or?
No. I mean, I'm laughing only because that's very flattering. Thank you for even thinking that I could actually be a dancer. It's very kind. But no. I grew up dancing.
Oh, okay.
But
what kind of dancing?
Ballet, tap, jazz, gymnastics, like all the movement stuff. But I was not good.
I mean,
I was not good.
Okay.
I did this from a place of love. It was actually one of the first things I remember in life, like just really enjoying and loving. But you can love things and not be great at it. And dance was one of those things for me. I loved it, but I was not great. And so.
Do you have a problem with the rhythm or something like that?
Not the rhythm, Gary. I got rhythm. Come on, I got rhythm. Judgmental. No, honestly, I'm not a dancer. Like I have so much respect for the art of it. I'm not a physical person. Like, I mean, the fact that I can go up and down as a photographer is like a miracle to me, quite honestly. So I'll enjoy that as long as I can. No, like honestly, I started dancing when I was 3. Like not real dance, but like my mom put me in dance classes. So I'll say I took dance classes from age 3 to age 12.
Oh, okay.
And then I got as bitter as you can be at age 12. I got bitter because they would not let me go so-called on toe, meaning like as a ballet, I wanted to actually go on toe, like be into proper ballet shoots, right?
Oh, okay.
And they were like, yeah, you're not ready for this. So I basically said, I'm going to retire at the age of 12, and you do your thing, I'm going to do mine.
Oh,
and it ended up being a blessing because I'm not a physical person. I'm very injury prone, and that's a whole other thing. But that, I think, set a foundation at a very young age for just appreciating. And when I see proper dancers now, I am in a place of such awe and such respect and such wonder for what they can do with their bodies. It set sort of that foundation for me to just appreciate, like, to be a real dancer is really hard, really, really hard. Yeah. So I know enough to be, like, as I say, I know enough to be dangerous about it, and I love, quite frankly, the beauty of it. I mean, and it's the beauty of it, but also I know what goes behind that. It's never just, when you see a proper dance image, there's so much that informs that dancer and the photographer, right, to be able to get to that moment, right? It's not random. That's something that has taken years, maybe decades of training, right? And part of what I love about it, which says something probably scary about me, I like the challenge of it because it's hard. It's really hard. And I'm not suggesting that I'm anywhere close to achieving anything with it. It's an experimentation for me, actually. It's like a way for me to push myself because I think it's hard to capture dance or any kind of motion. I think it's really hard to capture that in a way that is not just beautiful, but is also technically executed in a seamless and flawless way. But this is an interesting question. I'm curious your perspective on this, because I struggle with this. I love, for the most part, I love the spontaneous moments. I love the stuff that's mostly unplanned. But I also love certain moments that are moments. I think they're still moments, but they are moments when the subject, or as I say, the protagonist of a picture is aware that you're taking the picture. Do you lean more towards one style or one approach versus another, or do you see the value of both?
That's a good question. I personally like unplanned images where the person is totally oblivious to your presence, and you capture a totally natural environment that you would never be able to capture if you had it planned.
Yeah.
And I think planning an image is so much, I mean, everything is so controlled, because when you capture an image and you plan it, you can say, oh, the sun is over here, let's move you over there, let's do da. And you can get that perfect shot. Usually, to me, those images are, I can look at it and say, oh, you know, the folks, they're posing for that image. Maybe they're moving or acting as they're oblivious to the camera, but there's some element of, you know, composition and composure and planning and things like that. I like something where it's totally like, you know, you take something, you throw it on the wall, and it's like, blah, and you capture that, and it's like, okay, that's a totally organic moment that actually you captured that split millisecond in time that will never ever
happen again. And no one else will probably capture it, right? Almost certainly. So
that I love, and even the ones that are not even in focus, because I have a lot of those, not even in focus, but the angle and the context and just everything is like perfect, but the image is out of focus. I don't care.
Yeah, it's a more like the visceral, it's the moment, the emotional nature of it.
Right, you can still feel that moment regardless of if it was in focus or not. And that's why sometimes I say, you know, focus is overrated. It's like, you know.
I love that. I'm gonna start using that.
Especially when you're using a manually focused lens.
Which I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it.
So that's one of the reasons I say it, because I like to work for my images. So. And some people have said to me in some of the protests, they're like, everybody has automatic focus. Why are you still like? And
so why, Gary? Why?
It goes back to that film days. Before, you know, autofocus. I think especially when I was doing the protests, and actually because there was a lot of stuff going on, but when I felt like, okay, I gotta actually focus. That means I can say I want to focus on Deb as opposed to that other person back there. I can easily do that. And opposed to going like that or doing.
Do you feel like it engages you more in the moment? Do you feel like you're more in it? Because you're doing that.
I feel as though I am actually creating something, because I'm actually telling the camera with my own hand what to focus on, what to look at, and then I can do the aperture also with my thumb, you know, on the lens too. So I'm really just directing this tool that's in front of me, and I'm telling it exactly what to do. And that's why I say too, it's very therapeutic, because when you're thinking about all those elements, you're not thinking about like your mortgage that's due, or you know, or anything of this sort. You're like in that moment, or the argument that you had with your husband. You don't think about it.
It all drops to the back, right?
Everything is like doesn't matter anymore. But you're thinking like, I need to capture it in the way that I see it in my mind, and you're just so involved in that moment that nothing around you really matters. So
when I photograph, I feel like I am the most authentically myself. I think you're the same.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, that is my zone. It is when I viscerally feel, even if it's a strange or confrontational or challenging situation, it is when I feel the most authentically who I am, to my core. Like, I know I'm in that moment for a reason, and I'm connected to it. And it's a beautiful thing in many ways, but I also feel, especially as a woman, by the way, like sometimes that's a little sketchy. I have to be a little careful, and like Mark's like, you need to be a little bit more careful. So like when we're traveling together, or if he's around with me, and so like he's like sort of my sentry, right? Like he's there like watching, you know, and he'll be the person kind of making sure that I'm safe, you know, that kind of thing. But when I'm out on my own, which is when I usually like to photograph, nothing against him, of course, or anyone else that I'm photographing with, but sometimes you need to be on your own when you're out there, right?
Yeah.
You need to be on your own photographing.
Yep.
So what's next? What's next for you? Like, what's the next big project? What's the next focus?
Well, so everything that's happened to me has happened kind of organically.
Yeah.
Before the BLM stuff, I was going back home to Jamaica and capturing like where my mother grew up and where my father grew up and things like that.
Which is amazing.
So so that's what I was doing.
I might have to like insert myself at some point into some of that because I've never been to Jamaica. So you and I have talked about that, but I need to visit.
That's a shame.
I know we're gonna change that.
I'll be there next week, as a matter of fact.
Okay. But, I don't know if I can make next week happen, but
my
at some
uncle's
point.
90th birthday, so we're going to
happy
Jamaica.
birthday.
So thank you. I'll let him know that Deb said
That's amazing.
happy birthday. So everything has happened like on its own without me saying I want to start shooting blah blah blah. I mean, I was shooting I remember I was shooting in a studio for what's his name? Now I lost. I'm embarrassed because this gentleman is supposed to be executed November of this year.
Oh no.
So one of the things I found myself doing was shooting at a recording studio, and these musicians are recording in the studio. And I brought my mirrorless camera so that it's not making any clicking sound.
Yeah.
But they also brought him on a Zoom session. So what they were doing was they were recording the audio from the piano, and he was on the Zoom session, like doing poetry over the music. And I'm tiptoeing around the studio, capturing the musicians, capturing Keith Lamar.
Ah, of course, yes. Okay, yeah.
So he's due to be executed in
yeah, that's right.
November of this year.
Oh God.
So I was doing stuff in a studio, not thinking that I would be shooting in a studio.
Right.
And then not even thinking I would be shooting runners or running the protests, which led me to Define, which led me to doing other stuff. And so I guess what I'm trying to say, the next thing that I'll be shooting will happen on its own.
Yeah.
And it'll be something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But there's nothing.
And you'll know when you know.
I'll know when I know.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says to me that I want to go and shoot this. But I've also tried like events that are coming up, sending the promoters, hey, can I come and shoot your? And I wouldn't hear anything back.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what?
And that's fine,
That's
right?
not meant to be. Yeah,
exactly.
But everything that's happened to this point has happened on its own in some form or fashion. To be able to get a press pass happened on its own. I never said, I want to go get a press pass. Let me go shoot stuff so I can put on Dr. Oz or on Vice or Mother Jones. It just so happened that it ended up there. And all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, I got material to do a press. Let me get a press pass.
It's a formality at this point. Like you've actually done the work, which obviously justifies you having it. But,
So let me ask you the question. What's the next best thing for Deb?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what's been happening from a very negative perspective against API communities, I'll be very honest. I don't think until this had happened that I have spent that much time or headspace thinking about what it meant to be Asian or Asian American. Honestly, I'm just being very frank, and in some ways I have a little bit of shame around that.
Why?
Not that I'm not, because I think there are people who really own it, and like they know who they are and they really envelop that. I think it is never something that I've overtly put to the side, but I don't think until the violence started taking place against our communities that I ever really spent time thinking about this is what I look like or this is what I represent. And maybe it's because I am American and third generation Chinese American at this point, and it wasn't something that I think was at the forefront of my conscience. And it's forced me to confront what it means to be Asian, specifically Asian American or Chinese American. And it's better late than never, I suppose. Then I'm kind of leaning into that a little bit more and trying to investigate what it means. Like, what does my identity actually mean? Like, what is it? Does that mean something to me or does it not? How does that manifest in my own sense of self? How does that manifest in my work? And so I started last year a sort of informal series of really photographing more portraits of Asian Pacific Islander or AAPI artists, creatives, and activists, because I have particular inclinations and alignment, I think, with them, even though, again, I don't really consider myself necessarily activist, but I have a lot of respect for people who are really, truly activists, and of course, other AAPI creatives. And I do think that for so many years, we have not been as visible. And so I feel like as one myself, even if it's sort of part-time or sort of on the side, I feel like a sense of responsibility in a positive way.
Yeah.
Both for myself, but also for others. So it's something that I'm going to try to pivot back to a little bit more and try to formalize a little bit more. So we'll see what that looks like. But those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about getting into a little bit more specifically.
I don't personally think that anything that I'm doing is going to change the world. I think for myself, what I'm doing hopefully will be a reminder in future generations of what should not be done.
Yeah.
And hating Asians and hating blacks and other minority groups and things like that should not exist.
Yeah.
I know that the history of this planet has always been about oppression. There's always a community that's always oppressed.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Can that be changed? Not today, not tomorrow, but maybe a 1,000 years, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, it's a constant fight.
Yeah.
Right? And I think for you and I, hopefully imagery is part of that story to help remind people of some of those realities, both the negative and the reality, but also some of the beauty too.
I'm a butterfly, taking my time. I'm a skeleton.